The retooled Pittsburgh Steelers defense came out to play last Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. But don't let that distract you from the fact that there was a lot of things to like on both sides of the football. Today I'm going to be reviewing both sides of the football and going over how the last game went for the Pittsburgh Steelers. My name's Christian Bober, also known as Krytos, and real quick before the video starts, go ahead, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment. All feedback is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, let's dive right into this video. Starting out with one of the biggest storylines heading into this week, the quarterback position. Was it going to be Russell Wilson or Justin Fields? It ended up being the former Chicago Bear, Justin Fields, and he ended up doing his thing. Prior to week 1, Mike Tomlin came out and announced Russell Wilson as the week 1 starter, but Russell Wilson re-aggravated his calf injury that he was dealing with in training camp, and it ended up being Justin Fields starting week 1 on short notice. And I say short notice because the Pittsburgh Steelers are known to be really conservative when it comes to calf injuries, so they probably knew later in the week that Russell Wilson was not going to start. There was no doctors out on the field pregame with him whenever he was warming up. But with that being said, Justin Fields didn't have the whole entire week or even longer to prepare as the week 1 starter. So that means that the playbook was going to be slightly limited. Justin Fields is going to be on a little bit of a leash, and I think we'll see more from him moving on. Box score watchers might not think that Justin Fields had an amazing game, but I think that he came in, did what he needed to do, and didn't commit any turnovers. We almost saw one with the first snap between him and Zach Frazier, but I feel like that's probably more so nerves, first snap of the season, rookie center, and a brand new quarterback in the system. Fields had 156 passing yards with another 57 on the ground. He had a few big plays to George Pickens that were really needed throughout this game. Right out of the gate, week 1, the connection between George Pickens and Justin Fields seems to be so strong. 85 receiving yards on 6 receptions, 7 targets for George Pickens, a few huge plays. He should have had north of 100 yards if it weren't for a bogus pass interference call. And I think what we saw last week is just the beginning for where this offense could be potentially moving. Arthur Smith did a lot of runs, and then that set up the play action, which worked really well for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Courtesy of Jarrett Bailey on Twitter, go check him out. Justin Fields was 9 of 13 on play action passes for 81 yards, which was 4th in the NFL. Arthur Smith is going to continue to run the ball, continue to work in that play action, and keep the defenses guessing. It worked out really well for Justin Fields. He's really good with the boot plays, really good off play action, and using his feet. And a big reason I like Justin Fields, we saw it a lot last week, is that when there's nothing there, he can make plays happen on his feet. And that's something, especially with an injured Russell Wilson, we're not going to see. Najee Harris ran the ball angry as usual. He had 70 yards on the ground, 3.5 yards per carry, and he looked pretty good while doing it. And going off of that, the offensive line looked really good. I feel that Broderick Jones didn't look too bad. The preseason concerns were there, but it didn't look like it affected him last Sunday against the Falcons. Spencer Anderson did his thing. James Daniels looked good as always. We know what he can do at right guard. And surprisingly, Dan Moore Jr. did his thing at left tackle. He looked pretty good. He had a lot of good PFF rankings, which I don't really care about PFF. But I think the biggest part of this offensive line was the center position with Zach Frazier. His first regular season game, he came out of the gates looking amazing. I think that we found something special in the West Virginia kid, and I think he's going to be a piece in our offensive line for years to come. The dude's an absolute mauler in the trenches, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how he grows in the future and how he can help contribute to the Steelers. And before we move on to the wide receivers and tight ends, I want to go back and touch on the quarterback situation real quickly. There's a lot of speculation if Justin Fields or Russell Wilson should start week 2 in Denver, and I don't think that's even really a debate. I think Justin Fields did enough to keep that pole position. Russell Wilson was in the pole position. He's not available. He's not fully healthy. So why is Justin Fields not in the pole position as of right now? A lot of people on Twitter and 93.7 The Fan are calling for Russell Wilson to start. Don't get me wrong, I like Russell Wilson. But like I said in my last video, I like Justin Fields a lot more. There's a lot more of that talent, meat left on the bone, whatever Mike Tomlin said. But Justin Fields, like I mentioned earlier in the video, has that ability to run and make plays on the feet. We saw it so much last week. Big third downs converted on the feet. And I heard people on 93.7 The Fan asking, well, how do you tell Russell Wilson that he's not going to get his revenge game against the Denver Broncos? I'm sorry, but Russell Wilson's a grown man on an NFL football team. It's the NFL. We're playing to win football games. We're not playing for revenge games for Russell Wilson, who went and got cut by the Denver Broncos. If he played better, he wouldn't have got cut by them. And to me, this situation seems real similar to last year whenever Kenny Pickett went down with injury. Mason Rudolph came in, and they bought some time to see what they had in Mason Rudolph while Kenny was injured. They kept pushing it off, and they ended up riding with the hot hand, aka Mason Rudolph. And I see a very similar situation forming here in Pittsburgh, with Russell Wilson fully not healthy with his calf injury, which by the way is a huge injury for the quarterback position, even if it's just a minor injury. And I hope that this can all be put to rest with Mike Tomlin coming out recently saying that Justin Fields is preparing to be the starter against the Denver Broncos. I think that's the right decision. I think that what I said earlier is going to be their plan. They're going to buy some time, see what they have in Justin Fields, expand and open the playbook for him, and see what he can do against the Denver Broncos. And I wouldn't be saying any of this to you guys if Justin Fields went out there and didn't look good and threw multiple interceptions, had multiple turnovers. But Justin Fields went out there and did his thing. He did what he was asked to do, didn't commit turnovers, won the time of possession battle, which is huge by the way. And he made a lot of big plays to put us in scoring position. And a big argument is that the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't score a single touchdown, and we won based off our MVP, Chris Boswell, who's a dog by the way, went out there and punted. But I think altogether we have a new offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, Justin Fields, who didn't have the whole week to prepare to play against the Falcons. I just think overall those touchdowns will come. And this is not similar to Kenny Pickett last year. I've seen a lot of that too. Like I said, the Pittsburgh Steelers won the time of possession battle, which is huge. They won the time of possession battle and they won the turnover battle. When your offense is constantly going 3 and out like they did last year, your defense is going to be tired. So I'm sure the defense was happy whenever Justin Fields and the offense only went 3 and out one time in the football game. One time. People don't understand how huge that is for a defense. When your defense is constantly on the field, they're obviously getting more tired and they're going to be playing not at 100%. That's what we saw a lot of last year. In this game against the Falcons, we saw our defense at their peak. I'd like to see Patrick Queen get more involved. He only had a few tackles, but the defense looked really good, which I'll get into later in the video. Moving on from that, let's move on to the wide receivers and tight ends. George Pickens came right out of the gates, like I mentioned, on fire, and I think this could be a new floor for George Pickens rather than his ceiling. We've always seen glimpses in big games out of George Pickens where he would get a bunch of catches, be around that 100-yard mark, but this is the first week and we're already seeing Justin Fields and Arthur Smith call plays to get George Pickens the ball. They took a lot of downfield shots to him and they all worked out. George Pickens' hands are just amazing. He had a great game and he actually was involved in the blocking game if you watch some of the tape. I know that's a big concern for some people that doesn't show the effort, but last game he actually did. Outside of Pickens, we didn't really see any other wide receiver work. Outside of Pat Freiermuth, who had 4 targets and 4 receptions, we saw a few players have 2, even 1 receptions on the day. And to be honest with you, I'm not too worried about that. Roman Wilson's going to be coming back from his injury, but to be honest with you, I don't know how much of a role he's actually going to play. It looks like they're going to be working all of their tight ends, not just Pat Freiermuth. Darnell Washington got a catch, and Michael Pruitt got a few catches. And I just don't think that the wide receiver 2s and 3s are going to see the ball that much. I think they're going to be doing a lot of blocking, which we saw last week. But my biggest concern there is that Van Jefferson and especially Calvin Austin are not great blocking wide receivers. Unlike Miles Boykin last year, who was a great blocking wide receiver, those guys just can't get it done for a lot of the play calls that we saw last week. There was a screenplay that had Calvin Austin as one of the blockers, and that just can't happen. No offense to Calvin Austin, but he's just far too small to block some of these guys whenever it's a screenplay. Potentially we'll see Roman Wilson move into that role as the blocking wide receiver, but it's something to keep in the back of your head and to just keep an eye on. But all things considered, I think the offense did pretty well. I think they moved the ball, got in scoring position, and the touchdowns will come. You have to trust me. There's just a lot of things to like from what I seen last week. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to start with our boy, of course, TJ Watt, who had a huge game. TJ Watt was a game wrecker against Atlanta as usual. He had 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, 1 sack, and 1 fumble recovery. He could have had 2 forced fumbles and 2 more sacks, but the refs took those away from us. One of the calls was iffy, the other one was a blatant hands to the face. But TJ, as always, is a force to be reckoned with on the defense. He had an absolutely electric game, should have won Defensive Player of the Week for the AFC. But of course, some of those sacks were taken away and Greg Rousseau had 3 sacks, so whatever. I think the front 7 did a pretty good job against the run game. Bijan's a great offensive player and he still had a pretty decent game, but I think the Steelers limited what he could have done. And all the pressure that was coming Kirk Cousins' way, especially from Larry Ogunjobi, who had a really underrated game, it got to Kirk Cousins, and he ended up throwing 2 interceptions to 2 newcomers on the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. 2 great moves by Omar Khan. Dante Jackson, the cornerback 2, opposite of Joey Porter Jr., who we acquired from the Carolina Panthers through the Deontay Johnson trade, had an interception and almost had another one in the first quarter. And Deshaun Elliott, the other starting safety opposite of Minkah Fitzpatrick, had an interception, which was an amazing catch, by the way. And week 1, 2 of your brand new additions come out and make big plays for your defense. Love seeing both of those guys get right to work week 1, 2 new additions. But one of the new additions that I mentioned earlier that I would have liked to see get more involved is Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen had a real quiet day, and I just like to see him be a game wrecker like he was in Baltimore. And I think that will come whenever he gets more familiar with playing with these guys on the Pittsburgh Steelers rather than the Baltimore Ravens. Peyton Wilson, the rookie linebacker, looked really good. And you didn't hear Corey Trice's name too much, so that's also a really good sign as our cornerback 3. On that front 7 that I mentioned earlier, Cam Hayward was a beast as always. He definitely deserved that new contract that he got. And Joey Porter Jr. continues to dominate at the cornerback 1 spot. He was credited with only allowing 1 reception from Drake London. And after the game, he was talking his talk, asking how he did. And whenever he was told, he said that Drake London had a little warm up out there. I love to see that intensity and that mindset from the defense, and I'm looking forward to seeing Joey Porter Jr. move forward and continue to lock down teams' wide receiver ones. The Steelers defense showed that bend, not break mentality, allowed the Falcons to have some big plays, but then bounced back and held their offense in check all throughout the game. That's what happens when your offense isn't going 3 and out all game. Overall, Arthur Smith got his revenge. He wanted to hang 40 on him, didn't happen, but I think those days are ahead of us once we start finding pay dirt. And contrary to some fans, I liked what I saw out of the offense and defense, especially the special teams when it comes to Chris Boswell. Unfortunately, Cameron Johnston went down with a season-ending injury. We brought back Cordless Waitman, who actually is pretty solid as a punter. With that being said, let me know what you guys thought of the game down below. I'm interested in seeing your guys' thoughts and your guys' feedback on the video as well. And I'll see you guys next week after we play the Denver Broncos in Denver.